Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.
Hello everybody and welcome to Future Hacker. I'm your host, Maria Taide, and today we're talking to Aric Dromi. Aric is the founder and CEO of TEMPUS.MOTU Group, Breakthrough Advisory Board as a Service platform. He's also a keynote speaker, futurologist, geopolitical, environmental, and social strategist. Aric spent years helping executives and decision makers to refine their offer and understand the potential impacts that lie along the road ahead. His strengths lie in his ability to identify patterns and challenge them, along with his ability to use this skill to define new directions and experiments that provide a path forward. Aric, but I do remember that I read in your LinkedIn that you're a professional troublemaker. Did you stop that? Are you still one?
No, I'm still one. I think my greatest quality is making people feel uncomfortable. So I think we can take everything you just said and says making people feel uncomfortable.
You know, when I read professional troublemaker, I'm like, I have to talk to this guy, I have to talk to them. But let's begin by the beginning. Is there anything about your story, about yourself, I don't know, maybe the way you were raised, your family, that led you to where you are today?
I think my story is no different than any other person on the planet. It's like, our life is the accumulate decision making that we took, until any specific moment. But I mean, I often talk about being dyslexic and dysgraphic, and being born in the 70s. It's not something that we rushed to test like the sensitive millennials today, that everything is
yes.
and I mean, they threw you to the deep water and screw you. You have to fix it yourself. As such, I was considered just lazy at school. I mean, no one connected the fact that I struggled to read and write with dyslexia and dysgraphia at that time. I found myself at a very young age sitting at home and memorizing the shape of words. The first two books that I actually remember using in order to memorize the shape of words were Clockwork Orange and Jules Verne, 20 League. And I will not recommend Clockwork Orange to any 8 years old, but which can explain a lot of the other behaviors that I adopted throughout my life. But these two books open a gateway, a wormhole into a certain type of interests that build myself the way I am today, and being fascinated by the future, being fascinated by how do we use technology, or how technology is using us, what can we do, what can we not do, how do we stretch the limit of our own potential and imagination, in a sense. I mean, I contribute to the fact that I am dyslexic and dysgraphic, and I found a path that became my passion somehow. So
yeah I'm glad you were able to find your own path. It's just like you said, before you kind of had to do with your own tools, right? And one thing that you told me that I really liked and struck me is how this should be treated as a superpower and not a disability. But if you're just out of the ordinary, it's just it gets out of the script. People don't know how to act, right?
I mean, I'm not the first person that will will say that, but we do live in a society that tries to fit everyone into a box. It's not something that I could cope up with. I mean, as a very, very stubborn kid, when everyone went left, I went right. When everyone went right, I went left. Just because everyone went to the other direction, in the beginning, I also ignored the fact that maybe that direction is the right direction, but no, if everyone goes there, it has to be the wrong direction. So let's go in a different direction. It's a very unfortunate situation. Even today, I mean, education, because of my negative experience with the education system, education is something that is very dear to my heart. And even today, I see the way we're educating kids, the way we're educating employees. We are still trying to put them into boxes, and we have like a very, very light finger on the trigger when, in order to fit a kid into a box, we give the Ritalin, psychiatric medicines, because it's easier to follow the kid and put it in the box rather than set them free. And I think this is a very, very sad state of things right now, where we haven't learned the power of individuality. We haven't learned the power of having a diverse society like we claim that we strive to have. It's not putting everyone in the same box. It's letting people create their own box and live outside of the box if they chose to do so. I don't see the education system being able to cope with this type of ideas yet.
And I definitely want to go further into the education later today, because you can't really talk about, the future at all without talking about that. It's the very, very foundation, right? But I wanted to begin in a different place. And also something else that struck me. About almost a decade ago, you were talking about humans developing an emotional relationship with technology. So way ahead of your time. How we used to focus on measuring IQ, then we started talking about EQ, our emotional intelligence. And then you talked about ETQ, which is getting technology into this equation. And you're talking how men and machines are going to become even closer, and humans are going to be able to feel technology, and the environment could detect how we feel and build itself according to it. Is that what we today consider metaverse, or maybe its evolution? And again, it's been almost a decade. So did you have any major changing thoughts about our future and our relationship with machines and technologies?
Unfortunately, the gap is even wider today of where we should be when it comes to us interacting with technology. We live in a reality where TikTok is more addicted than cocaine and heroin. That's very far of us using technology in a meaningful, constructive, productive way. And I'm not using efficiency here, because efficiency is something that should be a byproduct, not the main focus. Most of the interaction models that exist around us are there to steal our attention. They are definitely there to invoke certain type of emotions, but these emotions are designed to make us buy more, browse more, spend more time online. And there is we are, at one hand, we think that we are observing the screen, but technology is observing us much more than we are observing it. So, it's not new news to anyone that we are the data at the end of the day, and if we are the data, we are the product. And places like metaverse just emphasize the danger of letting technology roam free without having any adult supervision, in a sense, to be able to understand what are the implications on us, on humans, when we are moving forward. Every single technology around us is designed around dopamine. And dopamine, very short-lived sensations, exactly like cocaine and heroin. But serotonin, which is a 350 million years substance, I don't see interactions between humans and technology that are there to boost serotonin. This is where I think ETQ can really excel. We passed the point of no return, right? We cannot live without technology anymore. Another thing that I often say to people when I talk about technology, people talking about like screens and iPhones and Androids, but the axe was the first technology tool we actually created. So technology is not digital. We should not confuse these things. Technology is a tool that enable our evolution to the place we are at today. As it became more and more digital, more and more we started to outsource cognitive and emotional functions to technology around us, the less humans we are becoming. And this lack of synergy between us and technology is extremely dangerous place to be. I gave a TED talk many years ago talking about love your iPhone and your iPhone will love you back. One of the predictions that I really screwed, because it didn't happen, and it's not due to lack of technology, it's due to human nature, where the people that are responsible for technology, they make money out of us, selling our souls to every piece of technology around us. And I would like to see a reality where ETQ is being taken more seriously, where technology is helping us to become better humans, not just to replace certain factions or to replace certain professions, but really help us excel and understand the next stage of human evolution. I don't see that happen yet.
So you are more on a more dystopian side of the future right now, right?
Look at the world. Tell me how I cannot be dystopian.
Yeah. I know. And I've actually been talking to people that are more optimistic about the metaverse. I'm not in that vibe as well. For me, it's a little hard to see it happening when we see what we have today and how we are heading. But still, there are many people that believe that the metaverse will be able to be the safer environment in which people value more the values instead of the commercial side. But if you see who is actually building it and who is behind that, and if you're still having the big conglomerates investing on that, it just seems like the field to garners more and get more from us than the opposite, right?
The problem with metaverse, I mean, it's people look at the metaverse and saying, "Oh, the resolution is very low. It's not sophisticated." We can talk a lot about the technology behind the metaverse and the amount of computation power you need to have in order to host the entire human race in a virtual reality in a high definition, satisfying resolution. I mean, we don't have this computation power today, so it's an incremental build-up of technology to get there, and that's it will happen one day. We will cross a certain threshold where we will have a non-invasive way. Even so, Elon Musk promised in 6 months he will connect brains to the internet. We will have a non-invasive way to have a full immersive experience within a digital landscape. The questions that we don't ask ourselves are there are more sexual harassments that happening percentage-wise inside the metaverse and outside of metaverse. Who is accountable for that? Who is accountable and responsible for economic models that doesn't cost anything to copy and paste this ball? And I mean, I know what's the value of this ball when I'm holding it as a physical object. I know the value of this bottle of water, but what's the value of objects inside of spaces that it doesn't cost you anything except copy and paste to manufacture them? What does the value of things where the laws of physics doesn't really need to apply inside of digital spaces? And this is a mind-blowing concept where you are having a full immersive experience in a digital landscape. The laws of physics that anchored you to your ass to the chair, like the law of gravity outside, do not need to apply in these spaces. And our ability to transform our perceptions and our brain will fundamentally, throw us. And I don't see philosophical discussions around these things. I don't see discussions about accountability on impact. And we are trying to take the model of the world as we see it today and just to copy and paste it into code. It just doesn't make any sense, because that's the problem I have with places like the metaverse. I mean, with all due respect to Zuckerberg and his company, who is accountable for the positive and the negative impact of more and more humans spending time in the metaverse? Who is accountable for, it's becoming more addicted than TikTok, and people needs to stay outside. You need to employ robots to actually give you an IV to feed you because you are stuck for days on days on top of inside the metaverse. These discussions doesn't happen, and if we don't start to tell the impacts that, or to identify the impacts that we are going to face, I mean, God help us.
And then we're back to education, right? One of the things that you said, technologies come and go. We should focus on the evolution of human change, on
Yes,
educational and intellectual infrastructure. So that's the way to go, right?
I mean, absolutely. I would like to bring human change in the context of the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, because I mean, this is also something we mentioned before. We put all of these wonderful 17 goals for, in order to secure a resilient, sustainable society, but we forgot, goal number 18, which is human change, because nothing can happen without human change. And, the only constant things for history was that human change. And we don't talk about that. We don't understand that, a smartphone is not smart unless it's bring value to the humans that are using it. And it's not smart because it doesn't bring any value to the humans that are using it. I mean, the smartphone is a direct descendant of the Gutenberg press in the end of the day. I mean, we need to focus on curiosity. We need to focus on creativity. We need to focus on rethinking the narrative of education. How can we teach people the profession of the future using the tools we have been using for the past, 200 years? It doesn't make any sense.
So, and again, we're coming back to that, and definitely something that we have to discuss more. And every time I talk to guests regarding, I don't know, even technologies, right? Blockchain and crypto and things like that. Like it doesn't mean anything if you're not getting to the foundations. And but as humans, how are we dealing with that? Like, and are we prepared? And how are we prepared? If we are not prepared, how can we be prepared? And which ways to go? But one of the questions that I keep asking, and I'd love to get your thought about that, is who is going to be taking charge and who is going to be prepared to change the educational system? Is it something that is coming from the governments? Is it something that is coming from the private companies, from the companies that actually needs to be qualifying people to be able to deal with the new technologies? Is it coming from ourselves as parents or as grandparents? So how do you see this evolving?
I think that I always look into things from three different perspectives, from a policy, technology, and a society point of views. And education is no different. Education needs to be tackled from a policy, technology, and a society point of view. Now, we think traditionally we say that education is in the hand of the government, but that's not really true, because the government really do not have the resources to understand what's happening within the technology realm, what's happening within the societal realms. They are very, very, very far away. But still, policy is one of the most important tools we have to actually challenge the status quo. We are using policy to keep the status quo rather than challenging it, and that's the big mistakes that happens right now, especially within education. I think that I would like to see more technology leaders and business leaders stepping into the realm of, or the domain of education, creating better partnerships with government, all the way from kindergarten to universities, and then following up to the workplace, in order to really rethink the narratives of what do we need to learn, how we learn. I mean, we are very good on thinking what do we need to learn, but I haven't seen a lot of universities or governments or employers think this is how we need to learn. And if we don't ask these fundamental questions, we are stuck in the same paradigm. And I mean, it's just a revolving door that no change actually happens. And I mean, I see universities falling into these buzzwords, and I have full respect to whomever do whatever, you want to be he, she, it, be, I don't give a shit. But I see people coming and I see universities giving degrees in something like, for example, gender studies. And I'm thinking, how is that going to help us establish a human colony on Mars? Because to live on Mars, we need to rethink the narrative of agriculture. People say, oh, what do you mean living on Mars? I mean, well, the promises are there. We will eventually roam and leave this planet and establish a colony both on the moon and on Mars. And you cannot grow potatoes like, the Martians simply grow potatoes. You need a little bit more than that. We are stuck in these buzzwords rather than understanding the holistic implications of things around us. And it's this disconnect between, right now the disconnect is between policy, technology, and society, that we need to find a way to bridge this gap. And we're employing people out of university into the workplace, sending them for like seminars from time to time and think, oh, they have a degree, they finished to study. No, education is something that you do from the minute you learn how to crawl or the minute you learn how to breastfeed, all the way until, you are like 6 feet under. It never ends. And it needs to be thought as such. But this idea will fundamentally rattle the cages of universities that are taking so much money from people to teach them in a very, very, narrow frame of time. No, it needs to be much broader, much more holistic. People should not be afraid to change profession, to mix. It's very trivial to talk about Steve Jobs, that he jumped between different courses that made sense to him, but look at the company that he built in the end of the day, because he picked up the stuff that were most interested to him. And this is where, I would like to see a global think tank for the future of education that is looking at it from a philosophical point of view to start with, rather than a financial point of view, in order to understand what does it mean to be a human in the year 3000? What does it mean to be a human in the year 2070? What tools do we need to have then? Both, physical tools, cognitive tools, emotional tools. How can we reverse engineer it to better create an educational trajectory that can accommodate a future that is not dystopian, and start to work on these seeds now. I would love to see a group like this comes together and starts to tackle these things.
And you gave me so many great examples when we first met of how we keep building over what we have today and over what we can see today, over our current reality, instead of expanding our minds to what it could be. So you gave an example as automation. We keep building automation over our current infrastructure instead of what we have today. And you mentioned to me how Amazon drone didn't fail, but this infrastructure in place wasn't the right one, right? So it's just this addictive way of behaving.
Yeah, we keep trying to develop new technologies to fit on a very outdated infrastructure, and eventually it's going to pick its ability to accommodate this technology, and everything is going to collapse. We talk about automation from a technology point of view, but we don't really talk about automation from an impact point of view, from a human impact point of view. I mean, automation in the automotive industry, the automatic gearbox was a type of automation that was introduced in the automotive industry. A taxi driver is another type of automation of a person takes you from. It is an automation from a concept point of view. It is an automation. I think that once we are going to, I always believed and claimed that humans and robots cannot accommodate the same physical space. You need to create two different layers of physical environments in order to accommodate humans and robots, because let's be honest, the minute people will understand that cars are programs to never hit pedestrians, they are never going to wait for the green light. They're just going to cross the road because cars are programmed to stop. So what are we going to do? We are going to randomly program cars to hit pedestrians once a year, once a month, just to teach a lesson. I mean, it doesn't really work. If you are stepping into factories and you see robots, they always have a net around them. So humans will never step into the robot area because you can never predict the human behavior, not the robot behavior, but the human behavior. Our infrastructure is extremely outdated. Our road infrastructure is dated back all the way to the Roman horse and carriage. Basically, the distance, the distance of a chassis of a car, it's equal to the distance between two horses' asses. That the Roman used the distance between two horses' asses to actually model the wheel, the distance between the wheels of a carriage. Believe it or not, this is also the distance between the boosters on the space shuttle that we put. We send people to the moon.
Really?
Yeah. But this is outdated. I mean,
Yes.
All the way back to the Roman Empire, a lot of respect. They build roads that I wish we can build roads like the Roman build roads, or like the Turkish, the Ottoman Empire. But we need a new type of infrastructure to be put in place. And it's not just the road infrastructure, it's our urban and rural infrastructure, it's our agricultural infrastructure, it's our education infrastructure, as we spoke. All of these things are very, very old. They are rotten. It cannot continue, we cannot continue and patch it and try to accommodate technologies that, the only thing that is actually stopping us of, achieving so much more is our outdated infrastructure right now. And I would like to see much more focus on that from governments, from cities, from organizations, from companies.
And where to aim, right? So one of the things that struck me when we were talking is that you were like about clean energy as an example, right? And you told me how solar energy and all those renewables that are not really renewables, wind power, how they are not really a clean solution, and how the whole process to manufacture, the what's needed to generate the solar panels and all those wind infrastructures, how they consume energy to produce, right? And this is something that you never really hear people talking about that.
I mean, go back to the like oil and coal are natural resources. I mean, we will one day become oil, like it or not. This is what happens when, creatures die. Throughout the years, humans have been very miserable of harvesting, storing, and converting energy into power. And if we have been miserable of doing so with coal and oil, who says we are going to be better doing it with solar, wind, hydro, and other new technologies, that new buzzwords we are going to come into? We do live in a buzzwords-driven reality, and we are falling into this trap over and over again. I mean, people saying like, oh, solar, that is a clean energy. Okay, but what is the carbon footprint of manufacturing the solar panels? What is the carbon footprint of, the life cycle of a solar panel? What is the carbon footprint of trying to get rid of a battery? I had this argument with a bunch of smart people about the cobalt that is being used in batteries, and everyone is saying, but we are not using cobalt in batteries anymore. Okay, you're not using cobalt in batteries in automotive, but you were using cobalt in batteries everywhere else. And the more electrifications, the more batteries. I mean, material science by default is not a clean science. And I'm not against electrification. I think it's a natural evolution. It's a natural process of moving from combustion engine to electric engine. But don't tell me it's going to make the world a better place, because every technology, we are looking for the shortcuts in order to maximize our profits rather than to actually create a clean reality. And on top of everything, I mean, Europe really screw itself up when like moving to green energy. I mean, you cannot command the wind to blow. I mean, in Sweden, solar panels doesn't make sense. It's dark. Some parts of the summer, it's even dark. I mean, we forgot that energy is about balance. Coal and oil are not dirty words. It's dirty the way we process them. And tell you what, it's also dirty the way we process solar and wind and hydro. It's also dirty. I mean, people in Sweden, they charge more money for plastic bags than paper bags. I mean, you need much more energy to actually produce paper bags than plastic bags. And plastic bags is a much more resilient and you know, it lasts for a much longer time. I mean, the problem is not with the plastic. The problem is with the educations of what do we do with the plastic when we don't need it anymore. And it's not the plastic, it's not the material itself, it's how we treat it. It's the perspective we have towards these things. Right now, it's very fashionable to talk about clean, green energy, but I mean, my own personal belief is, you know, nuclear power generation 4. We should put all of our efforts into that, because I think that will be the promise for the future.
That's where you're going to put your money in, if you could, like.
Yeah, that's where I will put my head into if I could. If I would have been nuclear scientist, yes. I think that the next generation of nuclear power holds more promise than all of other so-called green resources together.
So let's keep covering, you know, those new buzzwords and new technologies. I also hear so much regarding, everybody loves talking about blockchain and how I'm building using blockchain and using but still blockchain is also super energy consuming. I did hear about some startups trying a green blockchain solution. What's your thought about that? I remember you told me you don't need it. Like, you don't really need it to do what you're doing. Right?
It's very controversial statement, but I couldn't find a single blockchain. I couldn't find a single blockchain system that you cannot use the traditional software and code to actually bring to life many times even better. I think that blockchain, from a philosophical point of view, is a brilliant idea. From an implementation point of view, it sucks. It's very, very far away of where it can be. And the idea of a distributed ledger, number one, is not new. But the distributed system, you don't really need blockchain in order to do that. I mean, yes, now you combine two words, green and blockchain, so let's get more investment. But did blockchain actually change the world? I mean, did it solve world hunger? Did it help us to reimagine nutrition? Did it help us to tackle food deserts across, you know, so many places around the world? And it's not like something magical. It's another technology that a lot of smart people behind it made a lot of money, but you know, it will sure peak at a certain stage, and then a new technology will step in. And we keep focusing about the technology, and we are losing the ideas behind blockchain, of the philosophy behind blockchain, that this is what's appealing over there. But we don't have this focus, and you know, this entire, I mean, many people hate me when I'm talking about against cryptocurrencies and NFTs, but I have to bring it in the concept of value. What's the value of an NFT? So of an NFT. Why do you buy digital assets for millions of dollars? I mean, it's a digital asset. Everyone can copy and paste it and do whatever they want with it. And great, you have like a one Bitcoin or Dogecoin or whatever coin you have. to go and buy bread and butter, you still need to convert it to real dollars or real euros in the real world. I mean, it's a very nice idea, but you base it on an outdated monetary system. That's rather, it's, the value is not new value. It's an old, outdated value. It doesn't matter how beautiful you wrap it in the technological world.
It's still the concept of decentralization, which is great, but built over the old system that you're still stuck into, and you're still stuck into the central banks and then governments and to the roles of the current world, right?
I think like the only path for cryptocurrencies forward right now, I see it with the BRIC nations, if they will be smart enough to act and really create a decentralized economic model that is not connected to the current economic or monetary systems that we have out there. Can we build a parallel monetary systems, one that is based on the fundamental principle of a decentralized system, and instead of like trying to say let's just use cryptocurrencies, let's look into the values of a monetary system from a distributed ledger point, distributed system perspective, and then choose the right technology to actually implement it, not do the opposite way. But I do think that the BRICS are very much positioned to build a different type of an economic system, one that is, anchored in future promises rather than in past challenges.
Okay, so I wanted to go back to you about data, right? We mentioned in the beginning, and you talked about your concern of how data is currently owned by the big corporations. I think it depends on which part of the world you are, right? I think China is owned by the government, maybe the US is owned by the big companies, maybe Europe is still fighting for people to be able to have at least the protection, if not the ownership of your own data. So how do you see this evolution? Do you think that we will ever be able to be the owners of ourselves, our own data, and somehow to collaborate with the stakeholders and have all the platforms and companies? Will we ever make the rules, in other words?
No, I think, it's not an issue of digital society or digital technology. It's more an issue of human nature. Privacy was always an illusion. I think that policy is the closest tool we have to actually make sure that I'm not being abused, but you cannot stop the path that we are on. We are the product. This is, again, it's coming back to human nature. We don't decide what next YouTube video we are watching. We have 1.3 seconds to decide if we want to watch the next video or to skip to the one after that, but we don't decide what is the next video. We don't decide the next Netflix TV series or film that we are watching. The algorithms decide these things for us. We did outsource a lot of the decision-making powers to algorithms around us. I don't think we can ever take that one back. But I do see the need to use the tools of policy to minimize the damage and increase the value that I get of being part of such systems. My wife and I had this discussion. We had a discussion this morning, and says that we said, why don't we sell our house right now? We buy a very nice caravan and say fuck it. Yeah,
be a citizen of the world, right?
Yes. We are soon 50, and we says our kids are, almost everyone is out of home. Why don't we do that? And I was thinking, we took a walk after, and we continued to talk about that, and Are we still being connected? Are we still off the grid? I mean, can you really be off the grid? What does it mean to be off the grid? What does it mean to disconnect? Do you still need a phone? Do you still need a card to fill in gasoline? You cannot live in a cash, only on a cash-driven. It doesn't work anymore. I mean, maybe in the 1950s, yes, but simply today it doesn't work. Can I go and live somewhere in the Amazonas and join one of these tribes that I've never seen technology? I mean, they will puke me out in a second because I don't belong there. But it's very, very rare to find this pocket of complete disconnect. This is why it's so important for policy to have a much more important roles of protecting me, not protecting the technology companies, and helping me to get some value of me being the product at the end of the day.
Yeah, but so you do believe that there's a way of in the future having us actually getting the value back. So it's not about owning, but about at least getting the value back.
Here is an efficient way of having a distributed system. Every time I open my computer, every single thing that I do is encrypted. Everything is encrypted. And a company like Google can say, hey, we would like to give you very, very relevant ads. Do you mind to open that part of your interactions? And then I can unlock that part that I can sell it to Google, not for money, but in return for, and if the product that I bought makes sense, then I can get a better discount. I mean, this is what policy needed to do the original days of the internet. Everything needs to be encrypted by me. Everything belongs to me. But you cannot live in that encrypted world. You still need to open. But that negotiation, that dialogue between me and technology companies should be anchored by certain, policies that create that system. So I would love to live in a world like that everything I do is actually encrypted, and I can decide what information I give to Google, what information. I can decide I don't want any recommendations for anything. I don't give anything. That's fine. And then Google says, yes, but then it costs you $5 per month to browse the internet. And I say, okay, this is my decision. Okay. I will pay the $5 to browse the internet.
Sure.
I would like to see a world like this.
Yes. Well, we're talking about that, right? That's a beginning. Yeah. So, Aric, so I have a last question for you. So, when talking about preparing our leaders, and we always come to the discussion, of balancing the real life, which is, they just have the short-term goals and what they have to deliver and this years and this quarter and things like that, versus preparing for the future. And when I say about preparing the future, I'm not talking about the company, but, about people, people that are working for you. There's this just change in mindset that needs to happen regarding, everything we're hearing, ESG and making a positive impact. But that's it really requires a really long-term view that people usually think, not only companies, but governments, right? It's just about what I'm doing today and the results that I'm giving today versus this long-term result that is probably going to happen after I'm not here anymore. How can we expect those changes to happen now? Or do you think that we need a generational change and maybe the next generation is going to they're going to be born with this ship that we currently don't have, and they're going to have this sense of collectiveness, and living in a better world and being more inclusive? What's your thought about that? Like, can we see these changes happening now? Is this something that is coming to the next generations? And if you have a message to the current leaders of today, which would this message be?
Every generation we are thinking we need to have a generation change for the change to happen. You know, look at the war with Ukraine. If you go back to the times of the communistic regimes, we need a generation change. I mean,
We're just outsourcing the change, right? Just putting the
yeah,
responsibility over their hands, right?
it's not about generation change. I don't believe in that. I think
Okay.
it's about assertiveness. It's about a desire that existed within only few people in history, and it's very unfortunate that it's only few people that had this desire to leave a mark that is so big that is going to echo eternity. And people are very, we can talk about Julius Caesar, right? We can talk about Hitler, we can talk about Mussolini, we can talk about Martin Luther King, we can talk about Gandhi, we can talk about Churchill or Margaret Thatcher, we can talk about Gorbachev. Their leadership, their decisions, their few decision points during that will echo eternity. We will ever talk about these leaders, and regardless if they were good or bad leaders, but they had this burning desire for their name to be remembered throughout the future. I don't see that desire anymore. We don't have leaders anymore. We have pop pop singers, pop culturists. We don't have assertiveness. I mean, we have a lot of people with very small egos, and small ego is, the most destructive thing that a leader can have, because the bigger the ego you have, the more understand that you need to surround yourself with smarter people than you are. I mean, and small ego, that doesn't happen. It happens only when the ego is massive. We have, Steve Jobs died. Larry Ellison says, "Fuck it, I don't want to do it anymore." Bill Gates, I don't know where he lost his mind, but I mean, who are you supposed to follow? Sergey Brin? I mean, Zuckerberg? I mean, yes, you will follow Elon Musk, but he doesn't give a crap about Earth right now, which understandable. We don't have this assertive leadership around us that can say, "Hey, I need to surround myself with smarter people." We need at every government in the world to have a ministry for innovation and growth. We need to design innovation on city level and on country level. We need not to be afraid to take bold decisions, even if they are not the popular decisions, because they are strategic. I mean, when the premier of China, when he was elected, he put his vision of 1,000 years to the future of China. I mean, Sweden has a barely 3 months vision. I mean, we need these leaders that says, "I'm not going to realize this vision." And it's absolutely okay, because my job is not to realize the vision. My job is to make sure that future generation has this vision framework to fill it with their own content. We don't have these leaders. And, which bring to the message to leaders, maybe take the head out of your ass and realize that you're not smart as you think you are, and you always need to surround yourself with much smarter people than you. And you should not be, don't be afraid to say, "No, it's not right," even so people are demonstrating outside, because it might not be right. It might not be the right vision for especially with the green movement right now. You think the green movement, the approach that politicians are taking in the green movement in Europe is what is right for Brazil? Absolutely not. Brazil needs to find its own path within the green movement, not to jump into what other places are doing. And you need to have leaders that are not afraid of acting like rock stars, and stop acting like pop stars in a sense. So, admit that you don't know anything and surround yourself with people that are smarter. I mean, I would like to see a leader that says like this: "For me, there is no reason. You need to have political government, political body should have the minimum amount of ministers. Prime minister or president elected, that's fine. But the Ministry of Energy should be a nuclear scientist, not a political appointee.
Yeah.
The Ministry of Housing should be an architect. The Ministry of Health should not be a minister alone. It should be a committee filled out of doctors and nurses, not just doctors, but nurses and paramedics. I mean, okay, the foreign minister should be a diplomat, but it should be a diplomat, not an idiot. I mean, political positions should be less political and more professionals in order to, I mean, that's how you build a good governance. You need to separate the administrative layer and the political layer. And the administrative layer, even if it's appointed by the political layer, they should be professionals, not political, puppets. When you have leaders that are wanted to do that, you will see it change.
Aric, great provocations. Please keep being a troublemaker. We need to hear the things. It was such a pleasure to have you here on the show. And welcome to the Future Hacker Network. I hope you find many people like you to keep balancing and shaking the leaders out there, into hopefully a more inclusive society in the future. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It was a
pleasure. My pleasure, Maria. Thank you.
Future Hacker. Life. Path. Future.